Hello, thank you for tuning in again. This is going to be part two of my story in regards to growing up in a polygamist family, a lifestyle that the man that I knew or called father, daddy, and the lifestyle that he chose. Um, yeah, thank you for tuning in once again. My name is Nehru, and I am uh, an ascended master and an earth angel, chosen one of the 144,000, born on the 333rd day of the year. I am a healer. I've healed myself as well as others, both from seizures that I had until I was 8. Um, and so that was, to my knowledge, the first healing. And then um, there have been various others. I served 8 years in the military and U.S. Army because I am definitely about being all that I can be in this life, in this lifetime that I am here. And so I was born a fighter. I was born a warrior. I grew up in the projects of Joliet, Illinois, and uh, and needless to say, for those of us who have grown up in that type of environment, you know that being able to defend yourself is a necessity. Um, and again, not being one to start things, because I've come to realize that my unconditional love is really the anchor and foundation from which I always come. And so as I share the what I believe is going to be the part two and bring up to date to current time, the story about my father and his polygamous lifestyle that he lived for more than 30 years before being incarcerated in the state of Michigan, where he is serving 44 to 66 years for various crimes, fraud, and all sorts of things. One of the larger charges, or the largest charge, is sexual misconduct and impregnation of a 15-year-old at the time. And she's now well into her 20s. And, um, and so doing extremely well, by the way, fantastic. And so is her daughter, who she has. And so I believe I left off in 1989 when the woman that he was uh, showing to be his wife, and I do apologize for the pauses because I am an empath. I pay very, very close attention to the words that I use because my goal is to leave no stone unturned. And so even with my sharing and my speaking, I tend to pause a lot because I consider the word that I'm going to use specifically because I want to use as accurate in a word as possible um, in order to get the exact point across or make the exact statement that I believe I'm wanting to, or I should. Okay. So in '89, we actually came down here for a vacation that extended a little past returning back to school. We came down here during the winter time, which anyone who comes to Florida, when I say down here from Illinois, um, during the winter time, you're going to get spoiled, needless to say. And I was 15 at the time. And so when we came down here, I definitely saw Florida as paradise, like much like um, I believe Ponce de Leon or and others have when they arrive to this state on their sailing trips. So I definitely did, and so about a year later, like the second semester of my sophomore year, we were living in Naperville, Illinois, and I love living there. We were one of the things that he focused on was his status, right? And that was why he was so selfish with so many things. And you'll find that out as you listen. So he was selfish monetarily, with his wisdom. If it wasn't for manipulating others, and so, or if it, when it was for manipulating others, he would utilize it or he would offer it, or, but otherwise, he really kept things close to his chest as far as what his purpose and goals were for him living the life that he chose to live. And in part one, I mentioned a couple of those things as Holy Spirit has revealed them to me, one being greed and one being his laziness. The last job that me or anyone who's associated with the family knows him to have is in 1980, he had a banking job in Chicago somewhere at a bank. And he chose to leave that job to begin the lifestyle that he ultimately lived, like I said, for more than 30 years. So we are on vacation in 1989 in Florida. We returned back home. I actually got back, I want to say like 2 weeks into the second semester, into January starting. So 2 weeks after school had started back after Christmas break or the holiday break. And so I came home one day from, in 1991, from football practice. And his again, the public figure who was said to be his wife, they were never actually married on paper, I found out. She took my brother, my sister, her son, and her daughter that she had with him, and she left because he refused to change. And so because of that, when she left, he continued on his lifestyle because he really wasn't wanting to let that go, whether it was because of the money that was coming into him or because of the status or because of the pride or what have you. And pride isn't always a bad thing. I think about Kobe Bryant and his mentality, the Mamba mentality. There's great pride that he takes in his craft, right? And there's many others, but I relate to that mentality in my spiritual journey. And so that relentlessness, that fierceness, that I dare anybody to step to me who thinks they're going to overpower me, they're going to take me down, or they're going to win, and it's going to be an easy battle. I relate heavily with that. And so I come home from football practice one day, and at this time we were, like I said, living in Naperville in a very nice house. It was a Georgian on Collingwood Drive in Naperville, Illinois, for those who might be listening and are familiar with the area. So he comes on the intercom. There was an intercom in the house. And he says, can you come up? Now, he was I believe, dealing with some heavy depression because he did miss the lady who had left. And I got to be careful. I almost said her name. But he did go through some heavy depression. He had lost quite a bit of weight, and he's 5'11", 150. So he's already a thin person. He's a slender guy. But he had lost some weight, and I weighed more than he did, and I was 15 or 16 years old. And I'm a fit guy. I'm not fat by any means. And so he asked me where did I want to move, because we were in this big old house, and even though the women were still around, I believe there were memories in that house that he just really felt like he needed to get away from. And there could be something behind the scenes, behind that choice that I was unaware of, for instance, law enforcement or whatever illegal activity that was going on at that time. But because I was under his authority, I did not have and neither did I have the means or intuitive nature uh, to hear otherwise, right? So, of course, I say Florida because that was paradise to me, and we had just been here a year or so later, or prior, and so we relocated to Florida 2 weeks before my junior year started, and I ended up going to Lake Howe High School. Now we moved around a lot, and I came to find out that the reason why we moved around a lot was because of his lifestyle. So he, again, propagated himself, promoted himself as a minister, pastor. I remember going with him and one of the women that he was involved with, um, and him going to quote unquote interview, right, preach at these churches that have a voting system, which, by the way, is not the way to do things. The father sends sons. Sons do not go out and interview at churches, and that's another story for another time. There's no board that votes people in or anything like that. If the father calls someone to be sent somewhere, then that person they go and they are sent, much like he did David, much like he did Paul, much like he did so many that we read about between Genesis and Revelation. And I have to say between Genesis and Revelation because Genesis to Revelation is not the Bible. There are so many scriptures and so many chapters and so many books that have been eliminated, removed, and hidden from man in the Vatican and in other places around the world that the general public does not have access to, because man's goal is to control you. It is not to allow you to live a conscious awareness life, right? It is to live a subconscious robotic life. And that's, again, that's another story for another time. And that's also part of my purpose and why I've embraced this journey after being a tax accountant for 13 years. So we get here and things go on. By the time we get here, there's an addition to the family, and it's a son. And he is deemed, dubbed, crowned, I say that sarcastically, as the predecessor or successor to Kevin. And this individual from birth, and I'm sure they did witchcraft and things. And if you listen to part one, you know that he was heavily involved in witchcraft. I came to find out that he's a warlock and heavily involved in the Masons. Now, not all the Masons are evil warlocks and do spell work, obviously, right? But he was one who did and does. And so he, I'm sure, was from the beginning, from the pregnancy, one of the women who gave birth to him, to that child, is one of his favorites, actually, if not the favorite at that time, and had been for a long, long time. Her and her mother and her sister were involved in that situation. And yes, there was also another set of sisters that were involved in that situation as well. And those two families, if you will, stayed with him for one almost 30 years. One was 27 years. She left in 2009 after being in that situation since 1984, 85. Her sister remains there, following his orders, whatever, putting money in his commissary, whatever they're doing, right? Witchcraft, whatever they're involved in. They're still till this day. And today is ironic that I'm posting this because today happens to be his birthday. So today he turned 66, I believe. And yes, 66. And so it's really kind of ironic that I started posting. I posted yesterday part one, and today is his birthday as I'm posting part two. I just realized that. So again, nothing's ironic. It's all synchronicity and all divine timing. So he's born, and then there are several others that are born now. In 1995, I enlisted into the military. And on March 29th of 19, again, there's a 29 and there's a 3. And March, as I found out, would go on to be a month that stands for rebirth for me. There are so many events and significant changes and shifts in my life as I look back that happened in March. So March is definitely a transition month for me this lifetime. And so March 29th, 329, I leave for basic training and I go to Fort Knox, Kentucky. And the military fits me like a glove. I love order. I love discipline. I love rigidness. I love order. I just love that. And I eat it up. And I was chosen by my drill sergeants to be the cadet from 400 and something cadets that graduated. I was the one chosen to be promoted. At that time, I did not have any college, so I came in as an E1, which is the lowest rank in the Army, and was promoted to E2 on graduation day. I was the platoon sergeant for my specific platoon for 6 of the 8 weeks in basic training. So again, love the military, and I bled green. I didn't mind wearing a uniform everywhere I go, and unlike most, I wasn't eager to get into civilian clothes and all that sort of thing. I bled green and volunteered for war because that's my spirit nature, and I literally would volunteer for war. If they needed somebody to go somewhere to be deployed, I'd raise my hand because that's who I was, who I am. So, so a very, very good, successful military, 8 years of military. And the only reason why I got out, as a side note, was because I knew my heart was changing and he was calling me to what I am doing now, even though it has taken this long for me to get on this platform. I understand that as a healer, as I look back on my life, and as an empath, I see that along the way, I was definitely healing myself and others with my unconditional love. And so even with him, I can say that I do love him today. But that love is an agape love. That love is the love of Christ. That love is not a love of a father and a son. That love is something that is very different than that kind of love, which I had for him when I was a child, because he was my very best friend. And if he was out picking up poop, I would want to be out there picking it up with him. I would not volunteer to do that on my own or with anyone else, I can tell you. But that's how much I loved him. And that's what he meant to me when I was growing up. I had the opportunity to move back with my mother when I was 12, I believe, and I chose not to because I loved him and I wanted to be next to him. I was a daddy's boy. And so getting down here, there were several more children after I went into the military. So we refer to us as Generation 1 and Generation 2. And again, nothing's ironic, but there are 17 of us. And again, for those who have listened to part 1, you know that I called forth a kidney 3 weeks after declaring that I did not need dialysis, that I was just there to socialize. A phone call happened, and on 7/7 of 2017, again, synchronicities, 7/7 of 17, seven's always been my favorite number since I was a child. I received a transplant at 3:30, 3 o'clock in the morning in Pittsburgh at their VA hospital, transplant hospital, on the University of Pitt campus. So there were several kids that came, after I went into the military. And we refer to ourselves lovingly as Gen 1, the kids who were born in the 70s and 80s, and Gen 2, the kids that were born in the 90s and 2000s. The youngest of them is the, at the time, 15-year-old, she's now again in her 20s, that he got pregnant, and her daughter is now, who is biologically my sister. I don't do step brothers, and I don't do that. We either are or aren't. And if you have one, then we just are. Like, I don't see like that. That is petty to me. And if you feel another way, that's okay. I have a different revelation. So she is now, I want to say 14, I think. I know she's getting ready to go into the ninth grade next year. So yes, I believe 14. So she is the youngest, and I'm the eldest of the 17. And so there is a large gap between the youngest and the eldest, but there are 17 of us. And that 17 is what we know of, what the women know of, what we've counted, the siblings, myself and other siblings. And we're all over the country today. Two of us have served in the military. The eldest son and the eldest daughter, ironically, are the only two to ever serve in the military, and we both did Army. I did 8 years and she did 16 years. Again, very interesting. So, because that's 8 and 8. So, um, so what? Let me see. Let me regather my thoughts. So, okay. So I was stationed at Fort Bragg in North Carolina from 1995 to 1998. Before I went back to school, I re-enlisted, but I wanted to change my MOS, or my military occupation specialty, which at the time was a mechanic. I wanted to do something else, so I went into communications and went to Fort Gordon, Georgia for school. While I was there, I came down on orders to go to Germany. And I was excited because I am by nature, I'm a traveler. Sagittarius are travelers. Sagittarians are explorers. And so I was excited. But little did I know that the decision to do this would alter things forever between him and I. And so I come down on orders to go to Germany after school. I go to Germany. Now, I was married at the time, and the woman that I was married to was a childhood sweetheart. We had gone to school. We went to B.J. Ward in Bolingbrook, Illinois together, 6th and 7th grade. I went to Jane Addams my 8th grade year because, again, we moved a lot because he was always running from something. And so when I came home one weekend to Florida from Fort Bragg, I did all the time because during the weekends, those who are in the military or have been or are military families, you know that military installations on the weekends, especially holiday weekends, are ghost towns. And so I really did not like just staying in the barracks. And so it was an 8-hour drive. So I would jump in my truck right after formation on Friday when we were released, and I would head down 95. And one of those weekends, I came home, and one of the women told me that she had ran into this childhood sweetheart in Illinois when they went up there to move Kevin's parents down here in 1996. Yes, 1996. And so I was excited because I was lonely. The relationship that I had as from 16 to 20 with the same person had fallen apart because she was fearful for leaving her family and did not want to leave Florida and join me in North Carolina. And so the long distance relationship wasn't going to work, and long distance relationships for me, they never work. And so, at least not for any long period of time. And so that relationship came to an end. And so when I heard about this, she told me that she ran into her, I think in a Target or a Walmart. I was excited. And so back then we only had the yellow pages and landlines. And so I remember going back to Fort Bragg and calling the operator, every Target and Walmart in Naperville, Bolingbrook, Romeoville, trying to find out where she was, right? Because I thought this was the answer to my loneliness and this was meant to be. And maybe it was, right? Maybe it was, because there are many things that are divinely purposed, some for a season and some for a lifetime, and some for somewhere in between. So we finally get in touch with each other, and of course it's this very fast process. Literally a month later, 2 months later, we were married, and she was with me in Fort Bragg. I remember traveling on Valentine's Day weekend to get her. She did not have any children at the time, and so neither did I. And so we ended up coming back to Fort Bragg, North Carolina. So when I came down on orders, by the time that happened 2 years later, we did have a daughter together who, again, today I wonder, and again, her father has said things. This lady's father has told me that he doesn't believe that this girl is mine, this daughter. She's now an adult in her 20s. Doesn't believe she's mine because he knows his daughter was extremely promiscuous. And in fact, he tried to warn me of this in '96, but I didn't listen because I was love struck, right? Because love is blind and causes us to ignore things. And not so much love, but the emotion of it. And so what I ended up doing, going up there Valentine's Day weekend of 1996 from North Carolina to Illinois, getting her, and we came back. And so again, fast forward 98, we have a daughter who is a year and a half old at that time. And I get orders to go to Germany. Well, I go to Germany, get on the housing list. For those, again, who are in the military or familiar with that process, the service member has to go and get put on the list if overseas, or even if you're transferring within the states, you have to wait, and typically there's a waiting list. Well, 6 months later, we come up to the top of the waiting list. I reach out to her and let her know that I have housing for us, and passports and everything are going to be set. Military is going to take care of everything, and her and our daughter can come on over, and it's going to be great. Right? Get my orders changed from 2 years to 3 years, because if you bring your family, you serve an additional year overseas. That's just the way the Army at least works. I'm not sure about any other branches. She tells me at that time, and she was here. She chose to come here in Illinois. She didn't want to stay in North Carolina, and I understand that there weren't many people that she knew there. But she knew, ironically, funny, she knew two of the women, the two sisters who were now part of that coven, that occult, that polygamous lifestyle. She knew two of them because one of them dated her brother years ago. And so when they were in high school at Romeoville, and again, so very, your path is it's all rare. And the amazing thing about the Father and his infinite wisdom is the 7 or 8 billion people that are on this planet in the 3D all have unique stories. And they may not see them like that because of the trials and challenges at the moment, stresses, and events that look like devastation are really redirection. And again, what looks like devastation is really redirection. So I ended up really just kind of dumbfounded by the fact that she did not want to come to Germany. She said that she was afraid of coming to a different country, didn't know the language, and I told her thousands of service members and their families make this transition every year. And they have classes, free classes on speaking the language and all sorts of culture and all sorts of things available to service members and their families. Well, I had seen Kevin destroy families that would come into his church over the years. And what I never suspected was that he would do that to one of his children. So what I found out, and see, there's a throat shocker, right? Because there's not wanting this word to get out, but there's no way they're going to stop me, right? And so come to find out, I came home on leave, and she was living with him in his house with our daughter. And in fact, when I came home on leave, she did not meet me at the airport. He did. When I left to go back to Germany, devastated, realizing that my marriage was done, and what had happened, I asked for emergency leave. I went back and told my first sergeant my marriage is it's crumbling. And he allowed me to turn right back around 2 weeks later and fly back to the States to try to reconcile my marriage. That was fruitless. And so, come to find out, she chose to leave me for him. And so my wife, who I was legally married to, now he performed the wedding ceremony, by the way, which again is interesting. So he performed the wedding ceremony, but she ended up leaving me for him because when I was in Germany, the women convinced her that that was her purpose in life, right? Like they did other women when they would go recruiting, quote unquote. So she left me for him. And till this day, in 2023, she's still up there following his orders, even though he's incarcerated. I have not heard from my daughter since 2010 when the FBI busted down the door that he, 2 women and 8 children were staying in, including that daughter. So, what ended up happening was he ended up taking her, and essentially my marriage was over when I got on the plane the first time. Even before I came back to the States, it was over. And so I came to find out many years later, after the ascension process and going through the dark night of the soul, that the purpose was they knew who I was spiritually, and they did not want me reproducing because they did not want me and my divine masculine, because I'm a divine feminine, they did not want that divine counterpart and I, whoever they were, they did not want me to bring forth any children. That was the sole purpose for him continuously destroying the relationships that I was in over the years. And he destroyed several even after that. And so, as unbelievable as this story sounds, there will be a book that I am writing. And again, the title of that book will be like the title of these posts, and that is My Father, Your King. There's going to be the name of the book. And I believe I'm going to release it on Amazon Kindle first. And the release date is set for 8/4 of 2023. That happens to be the date that his son, Matthew, passed. And he passed on 8/4 of 2021. And so at the age of 45. And so the book is set to be released on that date of this year. And so he ended up going to live this polygamous lifestyle with these women, various women over the years, like I said.